The next portion of our project is going to ask us to look at our analysis plan and our first couple of graphs and analysis. So the first thing you need is to think about your hypothesis statement. When we look at the analysis plan, it's essentially asking us what information we're going to need to look at our hypothesis statements. The first thing we're going to look at is our data collection method. I've got my half marathon times over here sorted out by gender, and then we have some age groups. So I'm going to look at, is there a relationship between gender and finish time in the half marathon? And I'm going to see if there's a difference between males and females. Is there a difference between male and female times? You want to think about what group you're sorting by. You may have more than one group you're looking at. I could broaden this out and say and age group if I wanted to. Sorry about that. Random paste. And age group. And I could also say, is there a difference between finish times based on age? In order to do this, you're going to need to find the mean, the standard deviation, the range, and you're going to need to create a confidence interval. That's the only way to determine if the means are statistically different. You can choose the level of confidence. I'm going to choose a 95% confidence interval because it's by far and away the most common. Now let's take a look at our data, which you most likely have as an Excel file. What I have here is the ages, the gender, the time, but Excel or StatCrunch cannot deal with this time written as it is, so I converted the time to minutes, 66, 68, etc. And I did not use the seconds in this portion, I did round it. I'm going to go ahead and copy this data, and then I'm going to go ahead into StatCrunch and paste this data, going up to the Data tab, and I'm going to load it from the paste. It's going to do its thing. I'm going to copy and paste it into this box, and then I'm going to load the data. Okay, it looks just like I expect, which is good. I've got the 4 columns, including the gender, the time in minutes, and the age. Now, when you look at your data analysis, you want to think about creating 2 to 3 quality graphs. Not a ton of graphs just because you can. For example, one thing I am going to create is I am going to create a pie chart with the data to look at how many males and how many females I have. This shows me the majority of my sample is male, with the minority being female. I would then explain that in my data analysis tab. One other graph you may consider might be a histogram. I'm going to take a look at the histogram in the time in minutes. This will give me an idea of how many were in each finished time. And again, I would write a caption to explain that. Now, StatCrunch can make several graphs for you, but you want to be careful not to overload with too many. So when you look at your data analysis, for each hypothesis statement, I would say a maximum of 2 graphs or 3. No more than 3 graphs for hypothesis. So I've looked at the gender and the finish time, and if I was going to include the hypothesis of age, I would probably also include a graph to demonstrate age group. Next, I'm going to take a look at the summary statistics. So I'll do a stat, summary statistics, and I will look at summary statistics by column. I'm looking at the finished time in minutes, and I'm going to group this by gender so I can compare the males and females. Okay. If I was going to do the age groups, I probably would create another column here where I would label these for age groups, maybe the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, etc., so I could break them down into decades, not individual ages, as is common in many sports areas. So I've got my summary statistics, which I would then also just do a quick copy and paste into my, forget on the Mac, I gotta use the keyboard, into my paper. So I've got for my data analysis 2 graphs. I've got my summary statistics, and the last thing I am going to do is take a look at my confidence intervals. And I'm going to create one confidence interval for the males and one confidence interval for the females. And I am going to need to use these summary statistics to do that. So I'll go ahead and I will create Z statistics, one sample. I'll go ahead and do it with summary, although you could do it with data. And I can create either one for each the males and the females, or I can do this one sample with data and I can do them both at the same time. And I can say group by gender, which is what I'm looking at, and create my confidence interval that way. And that has the upper and lower limits for males and females. Keep all this in mind because next week we'll talk about how to interpret these in the conclusions portion. But for the analysis portion, you want to focus on 2 to 3 quality graphs, your summary statistics, and your confidence intervals, and one sentence that explains each. For example, this shows the time in minutes for the finishers. This shows the distribution of males and females. Just one sentence caption for each. That will cover your analysis plan and your data analysis, and then next week we'll pull this all together and talk about how to analyze it in the conclusion.